British Columbia is just 10 days away from Election Day, and last night, party leaders took part in the first and only television debate.
Is now the time that people need support more than ever? That's what I think. Or is now the time to cut back?
We are getting a lack of leadership from the other two leaders.
The Conservative Party will make sure that we're laser focused on people, on making sure that we meet their needs.
John Rustad's vision for this province is one that's rooted somewhere around 1957. I mean, he cannot look ahead.
David Eby said, "Oh, you can't do that. It's federal. Watch us."
What you hear from John Rustad, conspiracy theories, division, cuts.
David Eby wants to talk about conspiracy theories and anything but what's actually going on because he cannot defend his government's policies.
We don't have a candidate that says the vaccines give you AIDS. We don't support anti-vax convoy members.
Since we're going to continue to make those strategic investments, but we have to be able to get that economy going to be able to afford it.
An economist at UBC says your platform is written in pixie dust. Can you at least be honest with British Columbians? What are you going to cut?
Ensuring we don't give all the power to either of these parties is the way to move us forward as a province in a way that puts you, the people of BC, first.
So far, it's been a tight race with the NDP's David Eby and Conservative leader John Rustad essentially neck and neck for the past 2 weeks. But Eby went into last night's debate with a slight edge over Rustad. The latest polling has the NDP at 47% to the Conservatives' 42%. Could the debate change that? For more on this election, let's bring in some of the reporters who we've been checking in with throughout this election campaign. Justine Hunter is the BC politics reporter with the Globe and Mail, and Shannon Waters is the BC politics and environment reporter with the Narwhal. It's good to see you both. Thanks for being here a bit earlier in the week, this week.
Thanks, David.
Justine, it used to be a cliche we'd ask if there was a knockout punch about debates, and there never were. But then we saw the two U.S. debates where it knocked out one candidate and Harris did what she did to Donald Trump. What's your take on how this went last night? What's the takeaway you think BC voters get?
I don't think we saw a knockout punch here in British Columbia. We haven't really seen one of those kind of debates since 1991. I know I'm dating myself there, but there were some clear themes. And one of the things I think that came out of this was just this doom and gloom from the Conservative government about what British Columbia is today. And, it felt like there was Eeyore was in the room talking about how everything is broken in British Columbia. Can you name one thing, John Rustad said, that's gotten better in the last 7 years? So there was that vision for British Columbia, and both the NDP and the Greens were really trying to say, look, things are turning the corner, things can be better. So there was that real sort of contrast in leadership style.
Shannon's a consistent message for a lot of Conservative politicians right now in Canada, certainly here at the national level. What do you make of the debate? What do you think the takeaway people who watched it will have today?
I am very interested to see what we might see in future polling coming out after this debate. I do think that John Rustad had the most to win out of this. He's still somewhat of an unknown quantity to BC voters. They might be interested in his party and the ideas that they've been presenting, but they don't necessarily know a whole lot about Rustad. So this was his chance to really introduce himself to voters and look like a premier in waiting. I'm not sure he managed to accomplish that. He certainly didn't look like he was enjoying himself during the debate, whereas David Eby was more presenting, sort of like Justine mentioned, the work that his government has done and the effort that they want to have the opportunity to continue doing to address some of the issues facing British Columbians, like housing affordability, things like childcare, et cetera. And then Sonia Furstenau is in there trying to position the Greens as an alternative to the two main parties, and once again sort of presenting that hopeful message that things can get better.
So, Justine, the undercurrent of every kind of campaign is change, right? And that's what Rustad is banking on here. So Sonia Furstenau offering this positive vision of change. And David Eby, with some of the clips we play there, trying to scare people about what change to the Conservatives would look like, right? Candidates talking about vaccines that cause AIDS. Is any of that taking root in this campaign? We saw Rustad saying only David Eby just wants to talk about this. I don't, but it's his candidates who talked about it.
Yeah, the one of the opening remarks from John Rustad kind of set the tone for where the Conservatives were going. He said, "As I was coming down to the studio tonight, I came across a person that had died of an OD, an overdose by drugs, on the street here in Vancouver." He says, "This is the province that David Eby has brought to you." Now, I actually checked with officials like the coroner's office and police and emergency services, and nobody actually has recorded any sign of that death that Mr. Russ had talked about. But it was kind of that theme that he brought up over and over again. So the idea is the Conservatives are saying, we're going to bring you change. We're the party of change. We're the common sense change guys. In case you missed that phrasing, he repeated it quite a bit last night. But the NDP are also offering change. It's an interesting one. So they're saying we're acknowledging that not everything has gone well. We understand your feeling as a voter that you can't get ahead, and we need to make changes. We've backed down on decriminalization. That was one of the kind of weak spots for the NDP, and we've acknowledged that that wasn't working. So they're saying we're offering change, but it's a kind of change that you understand and recognize, and that the Conservatives are scary change. So you get your pick in this election.
Right. David Eby is the change that Kamala Harris is trying to be in the U.S., for example. Right. Shannon, let's talk about the Green Party in this. We've talked about the independents, and the who knows how that's going to affect individual races. But we saw Mr. Weaver hold the balance of power not that long ago. Where is Sonia Furstenau and her party positioning themselves in this? What does it look like their chances of some kind of a breakthrough are?
The Green Party is definitely facing an uphill battle in this election. I think that is partly due to the polarization and the fact that the Conservatives are running very close to the NDP. So for some voters who might normally be looking at the Green Party as an alternative because they're not really fans of the NDP but don't see themselves reflected in the Conservatives either, this is an election where that might feel kind of dicey. And so they do end up going for one of the two main parties, or whether they're enthusiastic about that vote or not. The modeling that we've seen of current polling makes it look like the Greens are likely going to be down to one seat in the next parliament. I believe that's Saanich North and the Islands, where Adam Olsen is exiting. But as we've talked about, Furstenau is out there making the case that the Greens are not fear-mongering and they are a face of change, and that their messaging is positive, it's constructive, it's offering solutions to the problems that the other two parties mostly spend time pointing fingers at each other over. And that might resonate with some people. Right,
as like David Kuhn, the Green leader in New Brunswick, he's running that kind of a campaign too. But Justine, I got to ask about one of these finger-pointing things, because throughout this campaign, John Russ said he's been in hot water over his comments about vaccines. And this week, a clip of the Conservative leader surfaced where he suggested British Columbia might participate in Nuremberg-style COVID-19 trials. He was asked about his vaccine position last night. Just take a look at this.
I'm triple vaccinated. The reality is, in British Columbia, I also promoted and supported people getting vaccines, especially for seniors in our communities. I was supportive of that. However, I am not anti-vax. I am anti-mandate. I believe that people should have choice. It shouldn't be thrust upon them and forced upon them or coerced to be able to take a vaccine.
You never know which John Rustad's going to show up.
Sure.
Okay,
when he's talking to supporters,
Mr.
he
Eby,
says, I regret getting the vaccine tonight. Now he's proud to be
I'll explain that to you.
So, Justine, what do you make of this? Nuremberg 2.0 thing, we saw a lot of that here during the convoy occupation. They want to put politicians, doctors, scientists, journalists all on trial for what they did during the pandemic. How is this issue playing?
Well, there was a contrast between last week during the radio debate when Mr. Rustad tried to just simply ignore all the questions about these kinds of things. This time around, he's actually tried to be a little more proactive. So he's actually apologized and said he didn't understand the question with the Nuremberg comments. And on the vaccine, you just heard him say, well, even though he had in a previous interview suggested that he regretted getting the vaccine, he now is saying, no, I was supportive of it. It's just a question of choice and how government governments are imposing these mandates around vaccines. So he's trying to soften that and present a more moderate kind of position on these things. And so I don't think the NDP went as hard on the record of Mr. Rustad and his some of the conspiracy theory promotions of some of his candidates. But they still brought it up, and I think Mr. Rustad did a little bit more to try and counter that this time.
Shannon, how do you think that went, that exchange?
I do think, EB's point, you never know which Rustad is going to show up, is one that might resonate. We have all of these clips that have surfaced over the course of the election campaign of Rustad making comments to a particular audience, often in a closed forum, and then later having to confront those statements and sort of square them with statements that might be more palatable to the general public. And so, like Justine said, he's had to sort of try and soften his previous positions in the public square. And I think we really saw that with the Nuremberg 2.0 and Rustad saying that he didn't understand the question. And yet he answered it. He asked for clarification and then he answered it and suggested that, BC might participate under a conservative government if there was another jurisdiction leading the way. So I'm not sure that that is all that convincing to people, that he didn't understand what it was he was talking about in that context. It's just that now he needs to explain it in a different context.
So, Justine, a lot of focus there on some of the more controversial things that John Rustad has said, but it's still David Eby's government and record that the voters in British Columbia are assessing. And, the drug crisis has been, that and Alberta. The death rates are extremely high in British Columbia. The cost of living is extremely high. How does David Eby present the change argument, right, when his government supported decriminalization and has been in charge there, and people just are mad and they blame incumbents? How is he pushing back against that?
Yeah, he clearly had prepared some talking points on this for tonight. He did look like he had done spent the time putting in preparing for this one. So in terms of the on that affordability, the Conservatives came out first out of the gate with what they called the Rustad rebate. And this was going to be a promise to allow people to write off some of their mortgage interest or rent so that they'll get a tax rebate to give them some relief. The NDP came back with their own rebate. They're saying it'll come sooner and it will be delivered to more households. $1,000 grocery rebate in the first year turns into a tax rebate going out. So they've been countering some of the things that the Conservatives had done and trying to kind of neutralize them on around the drug issues, where they say, well, look, we repealed decriminalization because it wasn't working, but we need to keep trying to do things to help people to try and lower the death toll here.
Right.
So yeah, they've clearly been working on the weak spots there. Another one was around their fiscal record, which I'm surprised that Mr. Rustad didn't go after a little more deeply. We're projecting a record $10 billion deficit. The NDP's promises that have been costed out in their platform will take that figure even higher.
Right.
And the Conservatives didn't have an answer really because they haven't actually delivered a costed platform yet in this election. And we're, as you say, 10 days out. People know what the Greens are promising. People know what the NDP are promising and what it's going to cost. And we don't know the answer on that when it comes to the Conservatives.
Okay, Shannon, I got about 20 seconds left before we got to go. Just your quick thoughts on that. David Eby and his pitch to voters. How is that resonating?
Yes, I think they are running on their record saying, when we've received feedback that something isn't working, we're willing to change our minds, change the policy, as with decrim and involuntary care as well. But also saying, other policies are going to take time to take effect, like their housing policy. They're saying they can deliver on housing affordability if they are given more time, whereas the Conservatives are saying they would take BC down a very different path in order to address the pressing issues that the province faces.
Okay, I want to thank you both. I wish I had an hour to talk about this because your election is fascinating. Justine Hunter, Shannon Waters, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.